What's the password to Wi-Fi here? I haven't been here for 2 years.
Yeah, it's Bowen Island 947 capital B capital I.
Thank you. I thought mine just connected. Oh, there it comes.
Sorry, guys. Logistics here.
Yep.
We're ready when you are.
All right, well, thank you, Hope, and welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see everybody's smiling, cheery faces back in the council chambers again. Looking forward to a lot of good work getting done here. Really terrific. And today, at the current time, we're going to go into the agenda for the Committee of the Whole of Monday, April the 11th, 2022. And just the opening of the council meeting, we acknowledge with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Bowen Island Indians. And we'll move right on to the approval of the agenda. It's pretty straightforward. We will approve that by consensus. Everybody's got the late items. So, yeah, thank you. Well, that works a little bit better, I know. And so we'll move right on to staff reports. 2.1, draft 2022 to 2026 5-year financials plan. Kristen Watson, Chief Financial Officer. Kristen, without further ado, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Council. We're gonna do this a little differently. All of the managers are participating in the meeting this evening, and they would like to share with you some of the things that are going on in their departments, and just give you a little update of what's going on and some of the new initiatives that are going on. So I believe I'm going to turn it over to, did Bonnie start it?
I think I'm starting.
Oh, Hope started. Thanks. Okay, great. Thank you.
The nerves.
Okay, so I like to share screen here.
Luckily, my department is quite straightforward. Okay, great. Can everyone see that? Yes. There we go. Okay, so I'm presenting today for sometimes called administration, sometimes called corporate services, but really under my purview is general government, legislative, and corporate services. And I'm presenting capital and operating requests and increase. So for 2022, we've got 2 capital projects that we've identified. The IT renewal and replacement is an ongoing project that each year we set aside capital funding for. And Chris and I have talked about making this a rolling item, so we don't have to do it each year. I just have a set amount, but for 2022, we are looking for $25,250, and that's for the regular replacement of the end of life assets. So that's laptops, desktops, monitors, VPSs, things like that, as well as some funds for new iPads for the incoming council. Website redevelopment and improvements. There is $30,000 being requested. This was a project identified in 2021 that we had $15,000 set aside for, and the project just didn't get going as quickly as we would have liked. So we're requesting that we have $15,000 for kind of carrying forward, as you might say. So total project cost $30,000. The project is already underway. And so that's rebuilding our existing website in an open source format, improving the accessibility functions, adding e-services and e-commerce is our goal, as well as integrating a public engagement platform so we don't have a third-party site that the public has to go to. So those are the 2 projects for 2022. For operating increase requests for legislative, so that's council, legislative council. So there's 2 items, council orientation. So we're gonna need a little bit of funding for training and development for the newly elected council. And that includes sections for meeting standards and procedures with Elenita. We have a legal session as well as maybe a few other things planned for December and into 2023. The inaugural council meeting will be held in November, and so that's a BIM hosted event. Council gets sworn in. You guys all know the drill on that, so some funding for that. For general government and corporate services, I kind of lumped them together. They are two separate budgets, but just for ease, there are a few items. The election for 2022 is being held on October 15th. So there's a budget request there for, I think, around 47,000. Kristen informed me today that there's an election reserve fund that we put money into each year, 10,000. So we have 30,000 that will be coming from that reserve fund to offset that cost, which was a pleasant surprise. Records management, we are in dire need of developing a records management program for VIM. So it is critical to ensuring the safe, efficient, and accurate storage of our records. Our physical capacity is at capacity, and we need to determine retention schedules and be able to manage our records better. So we are looking for, this would be a consultant-led project as well as with a lot of resources from in-house. Information systems, operations and maintenance. This is just a kind of year-over-year increase that we're seeing for the maintenance of our IT infrastructure and our systems. So that's licensing and maintenance and support services. Overall, we kind of slowly grow as a municipality and these things increase and we just need to kind of catch up with them. Municipal hall rent, that's something we can't really control, but it is a little bit of an increase, as well as municipal hall facilities and maintenance. These are things that we didn't normally do before, like gardening cleanup once a year, gutters, things that kind of went left and then needed to be done. And now we're sort of trying to catch up and do them on an annual basis, carpet cleaning, HVAC maintenance, things like that. And then legal services as well. We are just requiring just services of our legal counsel for agreements and contracts where that's, we do that on a daily basis here, and having that support is critical in, reducing risk. So we're just looking for an increase there. So I think that's pretty much all I have. So for outer year requests for things that are popping up in the future, moving expenses, potentially 2023, 2024, I'm not sure, depending on project timeline. Furniture replacements, things age out. Potentially assent voting for example, the composting project or any other capital project that may need external funding. And then again in 2026, the election. So that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
If you just go through that assent voting and composting, sorry, hope did I miss that? You just had it on the screen, assent voting.
Yeah, so that's like an elect or assent process. So either an AAP or a referendum.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry, just a feedback from Patrick.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions?
That's good. Thank
It's
you.
really nice to see you all in person.
It is.
So if I log into Zoom, I can see the slides?
You can see them here.
No, I can't.
Yes, you can hear.
Oh, yes, you can. Yes.
No.
Just make sure you're muted.
Well, I've got the sound down, so okay, I'll try.
Yeah. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, Hope. So next on our list of presenters, looks like Daniel's eager to share some information with you.
All right. Yes, I do.
Mayor and council, so let's try to figure out this. Are you able to share my slides from the gallery?
Yeah.
My computer just crashed somewhat in the Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kristen, is there a particular spreadsheet we should be looking at, or we're just absorbing all this and then?
Slides. I think it'll just look out.
Listen, you have to-
Allison, I got you muted.
Okay,
You have to mute. You can't just turn.
so I have to mute through Zoom, not on my
Yeah.
iPad, okay.
Let's get over here.
I'll definitely explain the situation.
It's okay.
Also look at it, you can look at it on YouTube, and then you don't have to worry about getting the feedback.
Live stream.
I just had a few slides to show you about from the planning department, and part of this wanted to highlight the main sort of driver that we're having as what gets us up is sort of increase in development activity we've had since COVID showing. And so primarily it's a large overall increase in revenue that has continued through this year.
Okay, got my iPad out there on the screen.
That's just Allison, I think when you talk, you show up as the.
Yeah, sorry, that just was glitching out for me. Just for a minute. There you go, Daniel. Go ahead.
So you want to go to the next slide. So this is showing the planning department revenue. I traced it back the last 10 years. You can see even in 2021, we had, we were sort of almost double what we were a few years ago. And that's primarily driven, the lower chart is the line is the building permit revenue, and that's the main driver of our revenue. And it does fluctuate. So you saw that, we peaked in 2017, it came down again and spiked considerably in 2021. So I've budgeted $300,000 in building permit revenue in 2022, which is lower than last year, but higher than we've ever had other years. So trying to be conservative and not, it can fluctuate with, one or two large projects. It has a fair amount of fluctuation, but trying to be safe, but that's still about $100,000 increase in the budget from last year in terms of revenue. And then I hope we can go to the next slide. And this is just showing the month over month for building permit revenue. So the red showing there on the bottom left is showing in 2022. We've had more building permit revenue through 3 months of the year than we have in any of the years that I tracked. So still continues to be lots of building permit activity ongoing. Or the next, so then that sort of drives into these sort of 3 changes. So the main project that we want to have included in the budget is e-permitting planning software. So this would be new permitting software to handle building and development applications. And we also budgeted to include other municipal applications, so public works applications or bylaw applications where people could apply directly online. It goes directly, it's like a cloud permitting system that tracks it and can handle it. We looked at ones that can then handle things like inspection requests, so people would be inspecting it directly or requesting inspections directly online, and the building inspector would be completing it and sending notes through that system. Sort of our current system that we have multiple. Is that a question, Gary?
Oh yeah, it's just a question. So somebody will be able to track where their application is in the process.
Yeah, so prior to doing the budget request, we met with 3 different companies to try to get a sense, and they all offer slightly different versions, but the ones we look at it is where it's like the applicant apply online and they request and then you will then see depends how you set it up, you'd see the application with the status of it. So if we said, okay, well, it's being reviewed, they would see that that's the status of their application. And when it moves on a step, they would get notified of the next step. And same with the inspections, they would notify, okay, I want the forms inspected. And then when the building inspector goes, and then you could take pictures, attach them to the inspection notice, and it gets sent not just to the the builder, but whoever is on the application would receive that notification. So there are lots of great systems out there that are leaps and bounds above what we currently have.
It would certainly save a lot of staff time. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's some of the hope is that currently, through COVID, we sort of moved to like a hybrid electronic model that ends up taking much more time than just a straight paper application system. And so hopefully this would improve all of that.
Danielle?
Yeah.
Does it have a payment function enabled in it too?
That would be combined with, like when Hope talked about the website improvements,
Oh, okay.
that would be incorporated through that.
Good.
So just other changes in the planning department. So part of the funding for that is our planning contract position we're moving. So last December, our approving officer and planning consultant retired, and it's not been refilled and handling the increased workload internally. And then we have some staff reclassification in the department to reflect that increasing complexity of work for planning. And then I had one more item that I hadn't added here, but the other sort of change we're seeing is just increasing technology costs. So through COVID, it's like getting all this staff members their own phones and those pieces also impacts the operating budget.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's ask, how much do each of those items cost? There was no.
The planning software was 27,000. Was the most significant one. The reclassification, I think, was like 8,000 total, is what Kristen put in.
And Daniel, how much, so is that going to be offset by increased revenue, or this money's gonna be on top of it?
It's offset by the increased revenue. I don't have those numbers, but I believe like the operating budget of the planning department, including COLA increases, was like 50,000, and the increased revenue was greater than that. So like I said, I think I budgeted over 100,000 more in revenue from this.
Okay.
So these numbers are in the budget.
27 is, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
And may I just ask the
Sorry.
increase in the building permit revenue? Do you have a ballpark sense of what proportion is from new builds and what proportion is from renovation?
Primarily, I would say that the new builds are larger, so the building permit revenue is by construction value. And so, you know, 2 or 3 large builds can drive the majority of our budget, especially back when we had like 200,000 a year in revenue. So like last year we had one house that paid something like $90,000 in building permit revenue was the big chunk we saw last year. So the reality is it's like lots of small renovations takes a lot of staff time and doesn't drive the revenue that like one large house does.
Thanks, Daniel. Bonnie, are you prepared to present? Great, thanks. Sure. Thanks.
Hi, Mayor and Council. I will join you in the future in the council chambers, but I'm here to present the FTE request as well as some details about operations and capital for both the Environment and Parks Planning and Bala Services Department for 2022. I do speak a little bit about the 5-year plan as well. I just love the mascot. I have to sneak him in there whenever possible. And let me just minimize this. So currently the Environment Department is staffed at 1.1 FTE, and the Manager of Environment and Parks Planning is part-time. I am 0.5 FTE, and the Environment and Parks Planning Coordinator works 3 days a week currently, 0.6 FTE. At least 6 of Council's strategic priorities have environment or ecological components that involve Environment Department staff input, analysis, and or project management. Some of staff's duties include environmental monitoring, ecological protection and education, planning for the construction of the on-island compost facility project, water conservation work, climate action strategy implementation, parks plan implementation, snow cove beautification, ecological restoration work, trail connectivity planning and acquisition, review of all subdivisions, rezonings, development variance permits, development permits, and invasive species management. The review of the permits is definitely increasing, as is evidenced by Daniel's statistics as presented. And in order to feasibly carry out duties to a desirable standard of care and to realize Council's priorities and day-to-day operations, a 0.2 FTE increase, which equates to approximately $12,000, is being requested, and that would be increasing Carla's component from 0.6 to 0.8. And just a little bit about the on-island compost project. During 2022, the Environment and Parks Planning Department staff will be busy with this project. There's an allocation of just over 100,000 that's being included in the budget, plus approximately 200,000 is coming from grant funding. And we plan to start propelling the project toward the scheduled March 2024 completion date. The actions this coming year include issuance of an RFP and hiring a project manager, finalizing design and engineering, permitting, environmental management planning, working with Hydro to install or start the installation of 3-phase power to the site, and site preparation and business plan development. Just wanted to talk a little bit about infrastructure replacement projects that are being proposed for this year. Sorry to move my little bar, being proposed, and Most of these are coming from the community parks reserve funds. Some of them, there's two kind of reserve funds that the Parks Department relies on for some of these projects, and that's the Community Parks Reserve Fund, and the other is the Improving Access to the Sea Fund. But just a little graphic here. On the left is the old bridge that supports equestrian use in Mike's Lorg, and they're rotting. I mean, our bridges and our staircases, a lot of them are in deep, dark ravines. They're in riparian areas. They don't see a lot of sunlight. They're made of wood. So we found a really good model here, and we have replaced one of the bridges this year, or last year, sorry, in 2021. And you can see the new bridge in Mike's Lorg with the steel beams and the decking that's easily removed as it rots over time. And Environment and Parks Planning proposed, there's a project in the works. And as we're all aware, climate impacts are being felt and seen on Bowen Island. Our shoreline areas are particularly vulnerable to erosive effects from intense storms. In order to maintain safe access to the sea, restoration and adaptive measures will be required over the coming years. Environment and Parks Planning staff are looking at creating a viable, safe access to Tunstall Bay Beach that will withstand ongoing storms while protecting natural attributes of the beach. The photo here shows the erosion that occurred late in 2021 during the king tide and storm surge event. And approximately $5,000 is being allotted to a design, or being proposed to be allotted to a design for Tunstall. And that monies could come from the Improving Access to the Sea Fund. In the 5-year budget, giving the aging park infrastructure and impacts to Bowen's beaches and coastal accesses, proposed allotments for park infrastructure repair and replacement and for maintaining safe access to our shoreline have been included in the 5-year budget. This is a picture looking down the Scarborough Grind, and this staircase is getting long in the tooth a little bit. It's still in fairly good shape, but it will be possibly having to be replaced within the next 5 years. It's a very big project. So Bala Services. Bala Services continues to respond to requests from the community, which have increased by approximately 38% from 2016 to 2021. Environment and land use bylaw requests for service, which are often complex and require more time as compared to other bylaw issues, have increased by about 43% from 2016 to 2022. Bala service staffing FTEs have been adjusted in 2022 to reflect the actual staffing component for the department. So there are 2 full-time Bala officers and 1 part-time Bala service manager, which is myself. I split my time between Bala services and environment. And these positions are required to meet the community's need. Due to the complex nature of some bylaw files, especially the land use bylaw and environmental issues and complaints, and the need to seek legal action to address some non-compliance, an increase to the Bala service operation budget legal services allotment is being sought, and that's an increase of $15,000. There's $7,000. That $7,000 was in last year's budget, so a total of $22,000 for that line item in the operating budget is being sought. And that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions from council?
Could I ask one?
Sure. Yes.
Bonnie, on the composting, we've got 2 numbers there. 100,000 was ours and 200,000 was a grant. I'm reading your slide correctly, is that right?
Yes. So the 100,000 would be from short term, possibly from alternate approval process. The 200,000. So the Knick-Knack Nook has $100,000 for us towards this project because they've just put lots of time and energy into reaching this stage. And also the provincial grant supplies 2/3. So we're anticipating approximately 200,000 coming from grant funding.
Okay, thank you. And was the 200,000 upon us one way or another raising 100,000, or was it just a $200,000 grant?
The 200,000 was the grant monies that's anticipated that we would obtain this coming year, and 100,000 would be our component. So a total of approximately $300,000 would be spent this coming year. Does that answer your question, Councillor Kale?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Bonnie.
Okay.
Can I just add?
Go ahead.
Background question? So what is the total amount of the provincial grant in total that we've got?
Total for the whole project, Councillor Morse?
Well, the whole project, but how much are we getting from the province? 1.1, I believe.
It's just over $1 million total. And this year we're looking at probably around 100,000. It'd be 2/3 of whatever we spend, sort of thing we have to report out.
So the application was talking about us spending 1.5 million if we got 1 million from.
Yes.
1,020,000 is the amount of the grant and 509 is our contribution.
I don't know who I put my.
Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. My question is about the long wooden staircases. Would those come back to council if, for example, there were some that council decided not to replace or to replace with something else in the future?
Okay. Kristen, would you be able to answer that question?
What's the magnitude? If council wished that something came back for consideration, is the magnitude of the spend, is it one that would automatically send it back to council to either award a contract or something? Bonnie, do you suspect?
So the project's scheduled for this year, Councillor Fast. Like one of them is the Emily Lane staircase between Arbutus Point Road and Emily Lane. You can't go on that, it's been closed. So that is potentially being funded by the Community Parks Reserve. Another project is the King Edward Bay bridges in King Edward Bay Park. They're rotten, they're very rotten. So that is being also potentially going to be funded by the Community Parks Reserve. Now, we're hoping that, as we go through the budget cycle year to year, we will be able to identify staircases or projects within that year that will need attention, and council, I would bring it forward in a presentation like this on a yearly basis. But regardless of that, there is, we want to start the conversation that we kind of have estimated that probably about $150,000 per year over the next 5 years is going to be required to replace our aging infrastructure. It's all sort of coming to a head, our park infrastructure, that is. So I hope I answered your question.
Thanks, that's fine, yeah.
Go ahead, Elsie.
So just to follow up, what's the estimated useful life of a wooden bridge or a wooden staircase?
Well, it's hard to say, but I'm looking at like Mike's Lorg, the bridge at Scarborough, from my knowledge, was around 2005 to 2008 it was built. So I'm looking at them sort of at a 20-year. It depends where they're situated. Like those bridges are in really dark riparian areas, some of them. So they tend to, and it's wetted all the time. It doesn't dry out and they just tend to rot quickly. So I would say a guess would be 20 years. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and Patrick might be able to add to this. I'm trying to talk quietly because I understand it's really loud in there. But Patrick and his team did some great work with the Mike's Lord Bridge in replacing the stringers with steel beams, which have the potential to last longer. So the goal is, as we're doing renewals and replacements, is to try to come up with better solutions so that we get longer useful life. The beams themselves should be able to last longer, and you just have to replace the decking. So
Yeah, the model of those bridges is really great. Yeah, and it just comes in over around $12,000 per bridge with the steel beams.
Great. Anybody else? Doesn't look like it. That's it, Bonnie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
I think it's me.
Me.
I'm Mayor and Council. I'll just share my screen here. Okay. So the Recreation and Community Services Department, our primary mandate is to come up with a diversity of ways to keep our community healthy and happy and connected to one another. So one of the ways that we're doing that is by coming up with different classes and activities for the youngest in the play care program at age 1 through, well, there's no end of age. There's keep going as long as you like. And we're really, one of the things we're really trying to do is diversify the options for the community and expanding beyond fitness classes. So really engaging in nature is one of our greatest assets on the island that we all love. And a lot of different types of lifelong learning opportunities, whether that's through art and cooking and discussion. You may have noticed the Philosopher's Cafe that started last month. So we're finding our community is ready and interested in a diversity of activities. So we're happy to offer them. These are programs for our youngest ones, as I said, at the Play Care program, which is a sort of a supplemental child minding service. It's not the same as daycare. The idea of that is to get these kids socialized and ready for elementary school, for kindergarten. And more than ever, this program is critical. They're really noticing a big difference with the kids that, you know, these are COVID babies. They were born in COVID. They've been isolated. They haven't got the social skills yet. So this program is more important than ever. We're really working towards getting back up to the pre-COVID levels. And I'm pretty confident that will take place this year. Well, I should say that given the current state of COVID and what we're allowed to do, I'll remain confident. Everything could be changed at any moment. You never know. Our youth center services program is active. It's again trying to get up to those pre-COVID levels, but we're definitely open every week for the kids to drop into the youth center, and the kids that are using that space are really diversifying as well, which is great. As we've been doing more things like bringing out the instruments, asking them what would you like to do for art, or coming up with different activities, it's bringing out different kids. They also run a lot of kids or youth activities or classes or activities such as the skate days. We're looking on doing these self-defense classes for girls right before the youth center opens. So they go into a class, get all empowered and powerful, and then just really take over the youth center is the idea. But get them out into the community, again, doing disc golf and hiking and things like that. So it's during some of these times when the youth center is open that our staff are really able to connect with the kids and form relationships so that when those youth may be in need and they need to know how they can access other social services out there off of the island, this is where we built that relationship with them, and then we're able to connect them to other resources out there, such as the Foundry. So our staff are really being connected with the community and doing what they can to know what's current, what's out there, and how to offer youth what they need, because it's a tough time being a teenager. This is the area of the department that also runs the Leaders in Training program. So this is an opportunity for volunteers, basically ages 12 through 17. who help with summer camp and they help with some of the community events. They're really learning about leadership and peer support and working with kids and able to implement some of their skills as they serve the community and give back to the community. We also run special events. So our department runs a combination of fee-based and free programming for the community. These are just a few ideas for the year that we're working on. The one on the right, that was just yesterday, the Easter egg hunt, not Easter, the celebration of spring egg hunt. And we were happy that we were the largest registration ever for one of these events, according to all of the files in ActiveNet. So that's great. We were heavily involved in the launch party for the Gate Moe mural. I've mentioned Canada Fest in there, which we just found out today. That's in partnership with the Hearth and the library. So we've just received that funding today. So it's a broadening of how we recognize our country and the multiculturalism and diversity in our country. Halloween and December, lots of events to be celebrated that time. You'll notice when you look at all the numbers that our department is not looking at a significant increase. It's a very minimal increase in operating budget. And it's primarily reflecting, updating our actual costs for rent with the school district and rent with the Bowen Children's Center to use the teen center and the fitness studio and that facility maintenance. So that's the bulk of our increase in operating. And that's partly because we've got a major project on the books, as you know, with this community center. So it's not the time for us to take on any other major initiatives. This is a big enough one. Kristen will be presenting some slides later on about some of the out of years requests for showing the incremental costs and the increases in revenue and operating costs for operating the community center. We anticipate that it'll be 2024 that those increases are really feeling the impact, but next year, 2023, there'll be some of that planning, additional planning that needs to take place. So we'll have towards the end of that, looking at possibly bringing in some new staff as we're planning for that. So we're certainly recognizing that we need to update the operating plan for the community center, and that's a major goal for us for this summer to do. That's the end of my presentations.
Thanks, Jillian.
Yeah, thank you.
Aaron, are you next?
I am next. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just going to share my screen here. Let's see. Is that working?
Yep.
All right. So just a little bit of our high priority capital requests. We've got some turnout gear coming due this year, as well as some new members. I've got it budgeted out over the next 5 years, but this year we're looking for 28,000. We also need to update the fire hall EOC and radio equipment and get that installed. And we're also, another one of the projects we're working on is replacing engine 31, which was approved in 2021. The equipment has been ordered. We haven't spent anything yet, but that will be coming due this year. And then in 2023, we would like to replace our engine 32. I've got that budgeted out, and I'm just going to go to the next slide here. So engine 32 does need to be replaced as soon as possible. It's a 44-year-old 4x4 pumper. It's our only 4x4 firefighting truck in our fleet, and the only vehicle that would be capable of fighting fires up steep and tight driveways where our larger equipment can't go. A little bit about our Fire Hall Emergency Operations Center. That project is nearing completion. We're expecting to open that facility in June, and that's coming along very well at this point. And then a big part of our budget is FireSmart. We have $100,000 in approved FireSmart funding, and that's used for community awareness and the community wildfire assessments, and is also part of Christie's FTE is used to do FireSmart. And yeah, that is all I've got there.
All right.
I just need to stop sharing here somehow. Oh, there we go. Great. Any questions?
I just wondered, how's the recruitment drive, Aaron? How many vacancies would you have in the force right now?
Well, we just took on 4 new volunteers just in the last month, and that's
Great.
going very well. We're getting them trained up. They've already done some fire training, and they're going to be doing their medical training over the next few weeks. So that's going very well. We'd like to take another 4 people next year. It seems like more so now than in the past. Volunteers are leaving quicker and quicker. You know, they stay for just a few years for various reasons. So we're needing to recruit new people every year now, more often than we had in the past.
It's gonna be a constant intake, probably. Eh?
I think so. It's just maybe partly the island's changing and the people's time. You know, they only have so much time to volunteer, so it's more and more difficult.
The world is changing.
Yeah, the world's changing.
All right. Thank you. Any questions, sir?
No, thank you.
All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
So are we on to you, Patrick?
Mhm.
They kept you till last.
Yeah.
Patrick has huge room in his budget. So
Patrick, do you want to come sit? Be more comfortable?
Okay. So good discussion. So I'll go through the highest priority things first, which is essentially relating to things that have already failed or are about to.
Yep.
And then we'll go on from there. So we have a number of culverts. This is one of them at Harding Road at Tournament Creek, where the road is already failed. There's the 3 culverts there are essentially half shells, and they have no bottoms, and so the roads underneath creates a void. The road collapses. It's been patched together. We're just hoping to get through to the or thereabouts when the flow is low enough and we can get it done, either through tender or using staff, and I'll get to that. So based on previous culverts, that's an estimated cost if we were to tender the project. We've got another one here that's, this is on Grafton Road. You can't see it quite as well, but I mean, this is Grafton Road right up above, and it's similar to many of our culverts. The bottom is rusted out and the flow is eroding the void underneath it. And in this case, it's underneath Grafton Road, so it's a big deal. And then down below where that path is, that's where the bridge is, approximately where the multi-use path would continue from where it's ended at Artisan. So in this case, there needs to be essentially a drop manhole and to extend the culvert under where the path is going to go. It drops away quite steeply to the north of that bridge. So that's, again, I wouldn't call it optional. I think it's critical. Then we have Adams Road near Eves Road, so down in Steely Park. And again, it's the first photo on the left is the inlet. You can't really tell very well, but the water, there's a hole in the side of the culvert, the water flows out. You know, that picture on the right is that's that little hole you can see on the side of the road, and then there's a close up of that middle, so it's hard to avoid that lane's been blocked off. So that, again, the road's already failed, so it's hard to call it an option. We've also got this Clarence Creek at Miller Road. That was, going back to 2020, that was partially completed. So essentially they repaired the structure of the steel and filled the voids with grout and did that part of the repairs. And yet they were, the rest of it, which they're still under contract to do, they were, the intention was they would apply this geospray, this polymer coating that's, essentially like spraying on a new pipe inside the existing pipes. And there's 2 of them there. They had some problems with that. Both the last 2 years, they have to be done because of the fisheries sensitivity. It has to be done in a certain window. So they're still under contract to do that at their 2020 rates. And so it's important that we get that done. We'll have to do the, the fish salvage and all of those measures again. And so we're estimating that's about $200,000 with the contractor cost and associated environmental works. This is the other sort of pressing need. So if you recall last December, somebody fell through the sidewalk just beside the pharmacy building, and this is just down the road from that where the sidewalk has collapsed again. And that's just been blocked off. And then over on the other side of that Miller Road intersection, this is the middle photo is looking into that catch basin on the corner there, the one that you see on the right. And I don't know if you can see that the pipe coming in, there's a hole and the water flows out of that hole. Some of it, maybe 10% of it flows in the outlet pipe. The rest of it is going somewhere else. And so there's about a 3-meter diameter currently void under that small hole that you can see in the photo to the right. And we have sent a camera in there. We got that information last week, and it's full of holes. We're not going to proceed any further on that part of the multi-use path until this is resolved. We were trying to coordinate the 2 projects, and we did get some pricing from DA Blacktop to do a portion of the work. Turns out it wasn't, after seeing the camera, it wasn't the most critical portion, but the pricing we got was it was about $320,000 for that lower, like 100 meters or so, down by the library. And this is just extrapolating that. So it's about estimating about $1.5 million to replace that that storm system, trunk road. And again, I don't. You can look at it. The south side is much better. It's PVC pipe. It's thin and all, but at least it's not steel, and the catch basins are concrete. On the north side, pipe's all steel. It's full of holes, and the catch basins are also steel. You can see there, so they're corroded.
So Patrick, just following this path, what's going on with it? You said we're not going to do that chunk, or just explain that.
You're not talking about paving, you're talking about pulp.
Well, I'm talking about storm sewers right now. And for the multi-use path, this week they're going to pave what they can, which we've given them the go ahead to pave from Miller Road basically up to the construction access for the community center being built. The section east of Miller Road is right beside this failed pipe. So we can't pave it. If we pave it and then there's a really high risk that it fails, that it collapses. And for that matter, if you look at the north drive lane on Trunk Road, it's there's cracking. Which you wouldn't see or shouldn't see for a road that was paved 5 or 6 years ago, which is another issue in itself. But, so that brings up the whole question of the risk. Now we knowing about this, knowing that there's a pipe full of holes under this road, that we feel about keeping that label.
But they will pave from the library up.
No.
It's gonna stay gravel?
No, but not until we fix this.
So it's gonna stay gravel.
It's gonna stay gravel.
For how long? What's the time?
That's a good question. As soon as we can, resolve this situation, we'll complete that project. And there will be some additional costs because, they're, BA did the job as one project. And now we're telling them to divide it into two and to finish this piece and then come back and do this piece. We'll tell you it's okay. So.
Can I ask, has this occurred previously?
Along here? Well, it occurred in December of this past year.
Did it occur before that?
Maybe, I'm not aware of it.
I'm not.
I don't think that, there was knowledge that this pipe was old, and just based on the vintage of culverts, which we can see, probably was not in good shape. Now we know the extent of it. So, I mean, this right here, this on the right, that was like the new curve that was just done. So now, just, not good. It doesn't make sense to continue building new infrastructure next to this.
So the one that failed over on the south side by Village Square, and that's PVC pipe?
No, that one's steel. The upper part of that is steel. And then there's a storm manhole like in Dorman Road, the intersection. And so down east of that manhole, it appears to all be PVC.
Figure it goes all the way down?
At least all the way down to that oil silt separator.
Yes, yeah.
Installed. I think the pipes draining from the other side, which are smaller, are also steel.
Yes.
Okay. Same situation.
One of the points that was made it was in the email from you, Kristen, was to make sure that it was clear to people that we're talking about the storm sewer here, and it doesn't have a connection to the sanitary sewer.
Right.
So keeping those separate in our minds and in the minds of the public, I think is important.
So really, the system is shot from the top.
Yeah.
And there is no point in messing around with little tiny subsection that's going to drive us to distraction. Plus, pulling up roads and then putting them back and messing around is really something that has to be done on a one-shot deal, or else we're going to double, treble the cost, whatever, trying to do it as piecemeal.
Exactly. And we did look at, because we didn't have the funds, we were looking at ways, because we were dealing with the section down the pipe.
Right.
And then now this section is, could you do it? Everything involves whatever new pipe you build, you have to tie it back into the old pipe that's full of holes, and likely with more flow, because especially if you're picking up flow from the upper section on the south side. There's no good. Like everything other than replacing the whole pipe is the wrong thing, essentially.
Patrick, what's the quickest that we can get somebody here to do that? Like, what would be, like, if you get the money, how quickly can guys come in here and do that piping?
That's another issue. Yeah.
If we're tendering it, could get a tender. We could get a design. We're still working on that. We could get that within the month, and I would say by late summer.
We can have guys in, or can
we could have it done. Feasible. The other thing is, this may be a bit beyond capabilities of our staff, but we've been discussing options to self-perform some of this pipe replacement work. Culverts more so, but there may be opportunities to part of this as well. That's true. Soon we'll go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is related to climate change impacts and increasing atmospheric rivers
and storms, as well as, you know, as we gradually develop in the Cove area and harden to more impervious surfaces, get more stormwater flushing off those surfaces. Will the replacement pipes take those projections about climate change into account? Will they be bigger? Or, yeah.
Well, that was the idea, is that this is a 450 millimeter diameter pipe, and then we install a 600. Even just the community center, that was previously a forest, and you didn't see very much in the way of runoff downhill along Trunk Road. That's probably going to change.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so.
Good, I'm glad to hear it, because I was just at the Local Government Leadership Academy. So there's elected folks like ours from all around the province. And it was a general theme that many municipalities, even smaller ones and bigger ones, are having infrastructure fail due to climate change impacts. I mean, we haven't had floods, but we do get the water. And so there might be, we're not alone. And we should keep an eye out on what other municipalities are doing. And also I would like to be strengthening our ecosystems so that the natural ecosystem services can take up some of the slack, so that we're not building bigger and bigger pipes, so that we can build in some permeability and what, you know, I saw an example from Gambier where they're building a seepage slope that sort of slows down like little terraces, that slows down the drainage off a steep slope so that it can go down in the soil, so that the ditches and culverts don't need to be as big. Anyway, I hope that we're looking at some of those things. I'm glad that the pipes will be bigger and that and you'll be replacing them with PVC.
Yeah, we wouldn't install, I mean, we don't want to install any more steel pipe. We were just talking about it earlier, like they have some up at the yard that so it's, we might just throw it away.
There might be another municipality with only 4 staff that would take it or would buy it, like an old fire truck. They do that. So anyway, I just that's good. Thanks. And but it's not, some of the systems have changed in the amounts of rainfall and things have changed. It's not only infrastructure coming to the end of life. Sorry, I'm cutting into the presentation.
Patrick, can I ask, is there a seasonality to this, not just for weather, but also for volumes, summer and winter traffic volumes? Well, it doesn't seem to be much different.
Seasonality of when you want to do
Yes.
it. Typically, they're easier to do in drier weather.
Yeah.
Which also is
Yeah,
challenging in terms of traffic.
I see.
Poison.
All right. Yeah, I see what that's leading to. Okay.
Okay, so those are the, I would call, well, we've also got this library. So we just did a partial solution here where cut out the old pipe and you can see a piece of it there. It's got, and so that old pipe is still running under the library. We did get a video of that too, and it's actually not as bad as the pipe in the road. So for now, it's there. We don't have, like, we don't, and it's not really the right, like building a new path on one side, building your new stage and stuff on the other side, and just leaving that is that's what the direction we're going, but it's not the right thing to do. It's not ideal. So I just, you know, in terms of culverts, to look over the past 3 years, there's been 4 culverts replaced, and the average cost is $200,000. That's we're getting there's about 395 on public roads that are mostly the CSPs, the lower age, and then 139 of them are, you know, called them larger diameter, or 600 or more. We've got a consultant hired who's doing an condition assessment, an asset management plan for this category. And we need to do that for all of our infrastructure, but this is a priority. So just really rough, you know, based on 200,000 for the big ones, 50,000 for the small ones. I mean, there's a total of somewhere in the ballpark, like 40 million for complete replacement. And it's not like it's not really something that can be realistically phased over 4 years, because they're all sort of, a lot of them are sort of similar age. So that's just kind of the context.
Patrick, just on the culverts, so I mean, we're looking 200 grand here, 200. Any thought around us taking this in-house? So us, yeah, just maybe if you could speak, I don't know, like the city of Vancouver would, for instance, I don't know what municipality size makes sense to do that versus always going at private contractors.
Yeah, so that was actually my next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, looking at, in terms of like internal capacity building for capital projects such as this, right? And, that would be sort of a good place to start. So we would, what we would need for that, I mean, currently we have a crew of 3 that's responsible for roads and parks, and plus the foreman. With that level of staff, we find that we're not able to meet, the desired level of service, like the level of service that we would desire, and certainly not the level of service that a lot of the community would desire. So we had already requested this, in past budget process, you probably recall. Essentially, it would be a lot more operationally efficient and safer to have 2 sub crews of 2, as opposed to, we have one guy, often we'll have, Grant or somebody will be alone in a truck. I mean, it's limited what you're able to get them to do, just in terms of safety and just efficiency. And then we're also, I think I should remind everyone that we're also taking on more infrastructure. So after we complete this section, we've got about 1.5 kilometers of multi-use path, which we didn't have before, that needs maintenance and needs to have debris cleared, needs snow clearing when that occurs. We're also taking on these Grafton Lake trails, which, even if we define the level of service for those trails to be very rustic, and it's you're still gonna have trees falling on them and need to be cleared and so on. So that's adding to it. And then there's this whole question about additional capacity to self-perform capital projects like culvert replacements. And I was talking to our staff earlier today about that, and there's definitely a willingness and desire to do that. I think we need more capacity for that to be realistic. So I would say that this additional FTE is probably tied to that ability to do that. Like we did the example earlier that Bonnie showed of the bridge. So I mean, we purchased the beams ourselves and had our staff do it, and it was I think it was under $15,000. And I was out with John Reed walking around his trail, like the trails that they're doing, and I don't know if you've seen the new bridge that he's done, and he was complaining about how it was $100,000. It's the same span. It's the same span. So I think there's maybe the culverts and certainly storm pipes is a bit of a step up, like a bit of a learning curve. But it does give us more control over scheduling, ability to tackle urgent issues immediately. We've had challenges at times getting contractors, even local ones. There's so much work going on for them that's other people's work too, and we've had more and more difficulty there. The other aspect
I was just going to say, the other thing is equipment. I think we probably have enough equipment to do the job. Specialized equipment.
We don't have an excavator.
Oh,
we don't have so you would need a large excavator, which I'm not saying we can afford that at this stage. Get to it a bit later. We are proposing a smaller one that we could use even for ditch cleaning, ditch maintenance.
Yeah.
We don't, we have this skid steer, which you can sort of do,
yeah.
but it's awkward. It's not so for the most part, we're trying to get somebody to do that, to a contractor to help us with that. And sometimes you get into situations where, we don't get that ditch reinforced in time, and now the road needs to be repaired. And so,
yeah, true.
But I just quickly, then the other aspect of this that I think is, especially if we're taking on more capital projects internally that, there really is a the public works coordinator who's been pursuing training and courses in this area of capital project management. Has a job description that is essentially an admin assistant that was established in 2015. And now we're looking at, procurement of material, having her procure materials and contractors and perform contract administration roles and, financial coordination with finance, and resolving property issues, which are always arising, and then, providing direction to the way she described it when she started was always sort of like, well, can you do this for me? Can you file this driveway access permit for me? And now it's more like providing direction. Well, you have these issues, can sending the staff out to. So I think that would be part of it too. And sort of admin support that would free up capacity. I know last year we requested another position. I put that forward again this year. In talking with Kristen, it seems like our when we finally get an accountant on board that enables Kristen to do her job properly and have the time to focus on what needs to be done there, that the person who's doing a lot of finance now would have some capacity to support some admin function in public works. That's my understanding. I think that a lot of details around that need to be sorted out. But I think this is even if we can do 2 culverts and do them for 50,000 cheaper than what it would cost to contract them out. Essentially you paid for that new position and the reclassification of the existing position. And it's not like it's, I understand that new positions and they're year after year, but I think this is also year after year. These number of them that we have to deal with. Yeah, so that's something that we're pursuing, and I think it will. If we're not able to get this increase in resources, it will be a lot more difficult.
Yeah, because that's a great business case now. So that example is that's one FTE right off the bat, right? So if we're moving in that direction up in the FTE, we'll make a lot of we'd be saving money in a way, right? So okay, yeah, glad you're looking at that.
Actually, how many culverts did you say? About 3?
395. Now a lot of them aren't that big.
So we're not 395 times 200,000.
No.
Thank you. just wanted to clear that. That's yes.
Well, it seems to be a large part of the cost, isn't it, for the road maintenance?
Well, and that's the other thing is that, so I've kind of gone through the critical stuff like the culverts and the storm pipes, and that sort of takes us beyond what Kristen's been able to put in the budget for this. And that doesn't include the annual road rehabilitation and paving program. So that's been kind of at 400,000 a year for I don't know how long, and with the amount of road we have, it kind of feels like you're not keeping up with it. And so when I put sort of budget requests in, I proposed increasing that to 500,000, and then ramping that up over the next 5 years. We may be in a position where we can't do any of this, like we can't do any paving this year, and that would be something to communicate that it's okay. We're just going to deal with the worst potholes, and then it's the same with rock hazard mitigation, like rock slope maintenance. I mean, we spent it was well over 500,000 on that Taylor Road work, right? And so we looked at an annual allowance, 100,000 a year is what proposed for rock slope maintenance, and, you know, we might not be able to do that either.
The question, and it's for Liam. There was some discussion among council a while back about potentially having a conversation with the province regarding the initial transfer responsibility for road, et cetera, to the new Bowen Island municipality. I'm curious about whether there was any follow-up on that. And then second, just to suggest that if there wasn't, we have on the council agenda the UBCM minister meetings, and perhaps we could start to address it there. Liam, does that make it?
Oh, so thanks, Councillor Nicholson. I don't recall talking about approaching the province about costs associated with the transfer ownership of roads on Bowen, but we certainly did talk about, and I've spoken, and we have spoken to the minister about the costs associated with taking over the improvement districts. But I don't recall a road discussion. I don't think that we would get any traction with the province about the cost of the roads. But I think that there is an opportunity for continuing to be successful with infrastructure funding for drinking water improvements. But I don't think we'll get very far with roads.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. My question here is, do we have any sense of the cost of wear and tear on roads with increasing numbers of visitors and cars on the road? Because I'm thinking that the multi-use pathway, what I've read is that the wear and tear on multi-use pathways is much lower because of course it's bicycles and walkers, and glad to see it being used today, for example, the part that I came beside, but also thinking in the long term about and do we count for increasing numbers of visitors when we think about roads or planning roads, or do traffic projections play into your estimates?
Traffic, well, I mean, only in the sense that if you're looking at a road where there's a lot of development happening that's accessing from that road, then you know, maybe
Okay.
you might want to wait until a lot of that development has happened. I mean, not really.
Okay, thank you. It's just one of the presentations in one of the panels last week was, I think it was the town of Nelson, and they were having huge wastewater treatment plant problems where they had budgeted 152 million, but the tenders came in at 184 million. And I might have the numbers a little bit wrong, but part of the reason that they described was because they only look at residents and they don't look at their 15,000 visitors that come every year. So just, I'm thinking about wear and tear of roads in the same way. And maybe it's something we should look at in terms of what do the ferry stats tell us in terms of numbers of people arriving by vehicle, because maybe we could try and keep those lower. So if people are coming here, they come as a pedestrian or on with a bicycle and use the multi-use pathway, which costs less to maintain. Anyway, I'm just.
Be nice if we could control that.
Yeah.
Well, we might be able to do it through, visitor management planning and destination management planning, and who do we want to invite and that kind of thing. So it just makes the multi-use trail. I just wanted to bring up the significance of it. It's not just a frill.
Understood.
And it could really go. So,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I was just interested in whether you were looking at that or not. Thank you.
I guess on that, I mean, if we look at if we were to proceed with paving, if we were able to, like one of the places that we would be looking at would be, Woods Road, which is really bad and it requires a lot of operations time to maintain it. I don't think it's really a heavy tourist destination area. And we have a lot of these culverts that we're dealing with. They're not being dragged. They're roads that access maybe a dozen properties, but it doesn't really matter if it's a public road and it's our responsibility to maintain access.
Yeah, thank you. It was just the rate of wear and tear that I was more interested in, but I hear you. Thank you.
So that's, I guess, other capital projects that are underway that we're essentially have to do. Because we're looking at 2022 costs, we did some improvements on Hikers Trail Road. There's some carryover costs from that we obviously have the phase 1 wastewater treatment plant upgrades. I think we talked about that enough. That we're targeting October, November completion. It's underway. We've got a Dunstable Bay Reservoir project that's underway. It should be completed this summer. We're going to have some additional work with the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant to get that operational. I don't have a good estimate of what that cost will be, but it has to be done. We're just trying to figure that out with the consultant and design consultants and equipment supplier right now. We've also got, phase 2 of the multi-use path that's 100% grant funded. I already mentioned the issue of the storage like and being on hold, but our intention is to complete that.
It's not going to be 100% funded anymore, is it? Because of all the work we're doing on it.
It would still essentially the storm stuff, no.
Yeah.
The path stuff, we have a grant for up to $647,000.
Yep.
And so I was hoping we would have a big chunk of that to apply to the next phase. And we may still have some of it. It will just be likely a smaller chunk.
Well, there's a ray of hope.
Yeah. And I don't. What kind of sucks is that projects like the service yard improvement, which is desperately needed, they don't. I hesitate to call it a lower priority because it is a priority. It's just not. It's not as much of a priority as the road that has already collapsed. So, we started. It doesn't meet our operational needs or staff health and safety requirements. The site's contaminated. We did start design work. We hired an architect-led team and the environmental work last year. And our intention was to carry on and complete that. And we estimated $280,000 to complete that part of it. And I was hoping to do that this year. And then construct in subsequent years. I don't know if that's going to be possible, which is why I put a question mark next to it. But I don't want to, I want to put everything out there that we need. And this is one of them. And then other capital project requests for 2022 that, they are potentially deferrable, right? The service yard it's a need. It's, worst comes to worst, it can defer. Same with the multi-use path design for phase 3. And that, it's 50% grant funded. So our share of it's only 42,000. So it would be a shame to not advance that for the sake of 42,000. We've got one of the public works trucks really needs to be replaced. We spent close to $20,000 in maintenance, keeping that thing on the road last year, and experiences that doesn't tend to get any better. So it's become a money pit. It needs to. Last year we had a truck in a similar situation. We did get a pretty good price at auction for it to offset the cost of the new one. We are also proposing to purchase a small excavator, not like the big 250 or 350s that you would need to put a concrete culvert head wall in place or anything like that, but it would enable us to to do the ongoing ditch maintenance and not be at the mercy of trying to get a contractor to deal with something that we should be able to do on a daily basis. It would expand the range of what we're able to do. Then there's that I mentioned already, the road paving and rock slope stabilization. So I mean, I put these as project request question mark because I don't know that we're able to do it given the cost pressures of the highest priority things, but they're important, and so I don't want to not tell you about them. A few other things. So, again, some of this coming from the transportation, own transportation plan. There's been a lot of discussion with the Transportation Advisory Committee about the safety of Seven Hills. It's not good. It's a lot of people walk down there. There's no shoulder. A lot of people drive too fast. The right thing to do there is a proper pedestrian trail. So we have proposed advancing the planning and design for that this year and constructing in the following year. Again, question mark, may not be possible. Same with cycling safety improvements, condition assessment for our buildings and structures. I mean, some of them we know, like the Slurp Bridge, you see it sagging, but the one last year, somebody made a complaint about it, and one of our staff went out and hit it with a sledgehammer, and the whole thing collapsed. Our buildings, we don't really, we don't have. It's part of our. I know Kristen's included some budget for advancing asset management planning. We are in a sense, especially for our buildings, we don't really have a good sense of what needs to or should be spent on those. So that was something I had in there. Again, I don't know that we'll be able to do that, but it is something that should be done. And then other capital needs in outer year 23 to 26. There's more culverts. I don't know what that number would be. Road rehabilitation and the rock slopes. The Carter Road Bridge needs to be replaced. I would, oops. So the MUP I was talking about, Artisan to Grafton Lake, and that's likely 3.5 million. I think we have a lot of opportunity for grant money to support that. We get allocated grant funds from TransLink every year that can go towards this project. And compared to the other projects that we've been talking about, this one is a lot easier to get grants for. But it is something that we would hope to do in the next few years. And then, we do really need this asset management plan in order to have a long range capital plan.
We done any preliminary routing work for that? Which way?
Yeah, well, we've done. We've gotten concept design and cost estimates for 3 different alternate alignments. One along the road, which is actually probably the most expensive.
I think it is.
One along, down Carter Road, along the other side, following the water line essentially, which you need a bridge over Turnbull Creek. And then what seemed to be the preferred, at least with Pat, with the Transportation Advisory Committee, is carrying on from the end at Artisan and following along the ravine, the south side of Turnbull Creek, and then crossing the bridge at Charles Lane, and then along Connolly Creek past the treatment plant. And our intent was that we would have a site visit with council and the committees. We're still working on getting permission and agreement from the property owners, not necessarily for the final solution, but at least to take people through their properties and look at it. So that's something Tash is working on. We're not ready to do that yet.
All right.
That would be something that we would.
Kristen?
I would like 20 minutes of your time, so maybe we could.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Is that it, Patrick? Are you pretty well wound it up there? Okay, any more questions? There's, I sure like the idea of Rob's idea of doing a business case on those culverts and doing them in-house. You know, it sounds like a winner to me, but you know, be nice to put some numbers together and find out how that worked out. All right, if there's no other questions for Patrick, we'll move back to Kristen then. Thank you, Patrick. It's lovely, but
Not like.
it's never a good see. It's never a good talk.
So now it's my turn to share with you all.
Okay.
Need 20 minutes to figure out how to do this. Yay. Here.
Perfect.
Okay.
Like
Today, April 11th. It's been a long road getting here. So I just need to move my way. Now I'm making
Well, before we get started, could I just ask a question? We will have a series of subsequent meetings to this one and public consultation and so forth.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that earlier, that we should use that forum, that Citizen Lab, to allow people to comment, you know, without having to attend a council meeting or something. But was there an expectation to have another committee of the whole or something?
I'm just curious how it's envisaged. There's a lot of material and most of us, I think, just saw this this afternoon.
Yeah.
So to get my head around it.
Describe the process of one.
Yeah, I think it would be valuable to have another meeting to allow you to digest the material, formulate some questions, just kind of think about what your priorities are a little bit. So I think that's a great idea. Liam, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think we can try to squeeze that into the timeline that we're working towards.
Yeah.
So why don't we do the presentation and talk about next steps at the end?
Okay, sounds good. So I'll start with the change in assessed value. I think when our assessment notices came out, BC Assessment said in bright letters that the average change was 24%. And when I did the numbers on the math, that's what I found too. The average change is around 24% increase in property values this year. This is a little thing that popped up on our roll this year, which is really interesting. Light industry. So we have only had $188,000 of light industry property for as long as I can remember. And this year there was an addition to the roll of $833,500. And I looked it up and it's actually the distillery property.
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's gonna come up again. So just don't lose sight of that. Underlying assumptions with salaries and benefits, just showing what we have, who we have on the payroll, and it's right in line with our reported FTE from last year. Salaries and benefits, underlying assumptions with regards to salaries and benefits, we've used that 2% COLA allowance. That's the cost of living allowance. That's the also do recall that we have a collective agreement with some of our staff, with the outside workers now. So that's the contract negotiated salary increment that we're required to pay. So we take the position that we don't treat our exempt staff differently from our unionized staff. That's going to cause a whole lot of problems going forward. So we try to keep those policies the same as much as we can. There's also additional space for staff to progress through their salary grid. So every salary position has a couple of steps in it, which come with additional increases. So there's on top of the 2% for those staff to whom that applies, we've included that allowance there. So the total value of the incremental salary cost this year is included at $64,494. When I started, I built the salary budget from the ground up. And I did some analysis, and I kind of tested the prior year salary expense versus the actual budget. And I found that there was a real difference. There were some changes which impacted salaries last year. I think that was the first collective agreement that became negotiated. So I think that last year's salary budget was probably a little bit more complex to calculate the actual costs. And what I found is I believe that the salary estimate for last year was too low, and we should have started from a higher space. So when you see the change in salaries last year, there's a component for the incremental salary based on the 2%, but there's also another amount that's needed to get people to that starting point. Yeah. There's also changes to the way our employee benefits plans were structured this year. So all of these things, it's kind of hard to parse out, well, this is the impact of the benefits and this is, but there's a couple of things that are kind of layered in there that are impacting the change in salaries year over year. I can't read that. We've talked about the FTEs and things that were considered for the budget that we haven't left out. FTEs we highlight because we want council to be aware of the FTE ask. We don't want to just stick them in there. We know that they're very, council needs to make those decisions clearly and with the full knowledge that they're approving additional FTE. But the one thing that is in there that hasn't made it in is there was a request last year from Bowen Island Tourism for additional funding. We have included $20,000 of funding for Bowen Island Tourism this year, but their ask was 48. And so we left out the additional 28,000. So we will await for council direction to include that or leave it, or what the message from council is. Again, it was quite a significant change in the ask, and I thought that council really should have the opportunity to consider that. Capital expenditures that are included in this financial plan. So of course, there's our community center. That cost will be spread over 2 years. 8.5 million will be spent between now and December, and the remaining 8.9 will be spent between January and July. The fire hall should be wrapped up by late spring, early summer, and there's remaining 1.5 million of capital expenditures to complete that project. So there's an allowance for the director of engineering to prioritize the projects that he knows need to be done. We've included 1 million of allowance for capital projects for 2022. And we're trying to increase that. Oops, sorry, I went too far. We're trying to increase that up to $1.5 million, which is what he has indicated is the minimum annual spend that could be undertaken to to support the roads capital program. While we're trying to complete this community center, we know that we have a funding gap. We know that we need to either be successful in a subsequent grant application, or that we need to fundraise, or that we need to somehow come up with an extra $2.5 million. It's a really big funding gap. So we do need to take that cost into account and make sure that we will have the money on hand to pay the contractor, the general contractor, when those bills come due. So a way that I propose that we can help close that gap a little bit is to include a $500,000 contribution to the Civic Facility Reserve in 2022, and then add another $500,000 contribution in 2023. So I'm proposing that as a way to help close that gap a little bit. And it's also going to assist with cash flow in this project, because I think most people are aware that there's people who are working on a second grant application to help fund the community center. But we've learned that the timing of those funds and that grant program even if we were successful, it's going to be past the time that the construction is complete. So there's going to be a delay between a successful grant application and completion of the project. So again, at the very minimum, we have a 6 to 8 month gap that we need to ensure that we would have funds to fill that time. So I'm proposing that we set those funds aside, we put them in the civic facility reserve. It is a non-statutory reserve. So it may be, those funds may be reallocated for another purpose by council resolution. So, if the fundraising came through and we didn't end up needing it, or we learned about the grant and we didn't need it, council could perhaps redirect that money to be directed towards the composting project or any one of those strategic initiatives. So I think it's a prudent way to reduce some of the concern around that $2.5 million funding. Capital expenditures, additional capital expenditures included in the plan. Moving on. Here's where I wanted to talk about Patrick. So starting in this year, we can afford to provide Patrick with $1 million in roads renewal projects. We can increase that contribution gradually over the next 2 years, and hopefully by 2025, get that amount up to his $1.5 million annual funding number that he has requested. The multi-use path is underway. I know that we're pausing that project for the time being, but that one's 100% grant funded. So I think we can claim expenses to date and get reimbursed for those. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have found the money to put into what we're calling the Trunk Road Stormwater Management Project at $1.5 million. There are some smaller parks capital projects that are proposed to be funded from Parks Reserve. And also we have included some additional funding for parks projects actually within the operating budget from 2024 onwards. So Bonnie kind of indicated that there's going to be a minimum maintenance, annual maintenance piece that goes on with the bridges, the footbridges and the trail work and that kind of stuff. So we actually just stuck an expense in there just to, and you'll see it in the operating fund, it kind of bumps up a little bit. Aaron mentioned the fire truck replacement. So there's one on order right now. Council did pass a resolution earlier this year to look to the MFA's equipment financing program for that. He's got another one that he's contemplating for 2023, and I have put that in the budget with perhaps contemplating the use of capital renewal reserve fund to pay for that. And then there's a bunch of smaller little amounts. Some of them are replacement of fire department turnout gear. There's a small radio equipment for completion of the fire hall. There's a couple of small things, plus Hope's request for the IT is included in that 172. This is a slide that I just kind of stuck in at the end, but it's like, where is all this money coming from and which fund is paying for which project? So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but if you're interested in knowing who's paying for what, you can find that on this slide. Thank you. The composting facility. So that's a 500,000 contribution from the municipality. And I've included that contemplating the use of short-term borrowing, and that would be borrowing that's paid back within 5 years. For other expenses, we have basically just used 2% generally. We've included higher provisions for fuel and insurance and those kind of charges that we know are increasing at a rate faster than 2%. And also in consultation with the Finance Committee, who indicated that we know that salaries and wages and benefits and stuff are increasing at a much higher rate. I did go through in years 4 and 5, I used 3%.
Okay.
One more assumption I'd like council to consider is you had an alternative tax collection bylaw. It was repealed January 1st of this year. So this financial plan contemplates reverting back to the general tax collection scheme. So that means that we do charge 10% on the tax due date and as a late penalty. I believe that collection of our outstanding taxes is a priority to help with construction costs and capital projects, and reverting back to the general tax collection scheme will encourage on-time payment. So unless directed by council, I will not be bringing forward an alternative tax collection bylaw this year. Underlying consumption assumptions around the community center. So at the moment, construction is scheduled to be complete by July 31st. And we will see the full impacts of all of the additional or reallocation of costs assumed starting in 2024, the full year of it. I have done my best effort to sort of throw in some preliminary estimates of incremental operating costs that are kind of obvious that I can come up with. And also, the additional rental revenue and stuff that was kind of pulled out of the operating plan. So I included that within the community recreation annual operating line. So you'll see that those expenses start to increase starting in 2024. But Jillian mentioned it, we're going to do a full-on operating plan. The current one that we have, it's so outdated, it's really unrealistic. And we need to, have a multi-department input onto doing a full operating plan. So we will make that a priority over the summer so that we have it in place for our next financial planning process. Some of the underlying assumptions in this budget, though, are an additional 1.5 FTE. I've added an additional provision for incremental facility maintenance costs. It's a new building, but it's a more complex building, and it's going to have HVAC systems and sprinkler systems and things that we don't typically have. So I have put an allowance in there. The debt servicing is a big one. The annual debt servicing costs on the 4 million are going to be, the rate's not finalized, but the MFA is indicating that debt, the cost of debt right now for long-term debt is 3.71. So that is going to, rates are going up, and it's going to increase our interest costs each year.
And inflation.
Savings or new revenues. I've added some incremental, very conservative incremental rental revenue of 17,000 per year. I've removed the teen center and the dance studio rent and the annual rent here at this building. And I've removed the rent from the fixed gym, and not the gym. I think we'll still use the gym, but the weight room and the breakfast down there. Impact of new debt. This is a big one. So starting this year is the first, I guess we've had the community lands for a little bit, but now we're adding, for this year, we're going to start adding costs now for the fire hall, because we're doing that through kind of a short-term borrowing. We're going to convert it to long-term in the fall. But in the meantime, we are paying interest during this period now, and we will right through the fall, and then those interest and principal payments will be fixed. Once that goes into long-term, it's not variable anymore, so it will be fixed. Next year, we will really see an impact. All of the community center debt, the fire hall debt, the community lands debt, those three will be locked in, and we will be in making those long-term interest and principal repayments for about the next 10 years. It'll open up again in 10 years, and we will be renegotiating it at the going rate at that time. So what that looks like for us, we have the community lands debt, $2 million, and that costs 42,000 in principal and 64,000 in interest. The community center $4 million debt indicative interest rate is 3.7%. That will cost $92,100, almost $150,000 in interest. And lastly, the 3 million fire hall, again, 30 years at 3.71. We'll be looking at 68 and 111 in interest. So total 10-year locked-in costs ongoing starting next year will be $527,000 per year. And then I've got the 5-year fire truck loan that we just agreed to. That will be about $135,000 for the next 5 years. And then if council goes forward and accesses financing to do the composting facility, that will for another 5 years add approximately another $120,000. So those payments are going to eat up a big part of our municipal budget in the next few years. Talking about our contributions to reserve funds. So we are going to resume using several different statutory reserve funds. And I feel quite strongly about this. I believe that it provides our managers with clarity around the funding that they have available to them for their longer term projects. I think it results in better long-term planning because the managers can optimize the timing of their capital projects if they know that they have some certainty around how much they're going to get and how long they're going to get that for. So we'll be using the Recreation Community Use Reserve Fund to help support the community center and the additional things that we'll need for that building. The Community Parks Reserve Fund, the Roads and Infrastructure Fund will be dedicated to Patrick. The Fire Equipment Replacement Fund will be dedicated to Aaron, and the Equipment Reserve Fund is again one for mobile equipment for Patrick. So starting this year with our plan to try to rebuild our reserves, we hope that we will be able to continue to put that money with, this is money going in, and we're not really clear on what is coming out at this point. So this would be wonderful if it would stay like that. But I know Patrick and I are going to have several conversations about this between now and then. So our non-statutory reserves, we had all kinds of little pots of little funny money and stuff, but I'm basically clearing them all out this year, using them for the civic facilities for the community center. And going forward, we'll really only have that civic facilities fund until that's no longer needed. And Hope's little cyclic $30,000 every 3 or 4 years reserve. And of course, our accumulated surplus. So I have provided with the material.
That's for the election, right?
The 30,000, yeah. Yeah. Oh, there is one more statutory reserve, non-statutory reserve that kind of hides itself, which is access to the sea, some amenity contributions from, from subdivisions or rezonings and stuff that happened.
That was one check, I think.
There was two, we had two of them. One was in Woods Road and one was by you. And yeah, we still have some of those. So I've accessed what I can this year to assist Bonnie with her beach access programs. And so we're gonna just use those and spend those down until they're gone, just for whatever little beach access programs we can do. And then we'll just start really kind of focusing on funding that statutory reserve. It's important, they all need to be disclosed separately in the community charter. And again, it increases the reporting transparency and the accountability of council to the public. And it really is a way for you, councillors, to communicate your strategic priorities to the public. So if you're funding your roads reserve, then that people know and they see that infrastructure is a real priority. Or if you're funding some other reserve, that's just another way through your financial statements that you can signal your priorities to the community. The plan's in place. We want to make consistent long-term progress to growing those balances and replenishing those balances. In 2022, we're going to put 1.9 in, and we're going to immediately pull out 1.5. Well, the 5 is going to sit there for civic facilities, but We're putting one into Patrick's Road and Infrastructure Reserve, and we'll pull that up just the second he gets it. The increased property tax revenue requirement this year is 10.4%. That works out to an additional $636,900 of additional revenue for 2022. And I think it's fair to say that given that huge increase in our debt payments, principal and interest payments coming next year, that it's very likely that we can expect to have a similar increase next year as well. What's driving this change, it can be explained in a couple of ways. One is the excess contributions to reserves this year over last year that we made, and we're going to tuck that away to help fund any shortfall in the construction budget. So the requirement that we put those funds away for the community center is driving part of this increase. There are certain things that are included in the operating fund that are also driving this increase. So one you heard earlier from Daniel was his planning software. You heard Patrick mention asset management. There was already 15,000 in the budget for asset management, but I can tell you, we went through all of our meetings with the water systems, and it's on their minds too. It's on our minds. The water systems are giving us $25,000 collectively, and we'll have $75,000 in total this year included in the budget to spend and get going on the asset management plan. That's great. There are things, supplies, inputs, fuel, property insurance. I can't believe the increases in our property insurance this year. Fuel supplies, that kind of stuff. I've estimated the added cost in the public works budget there to be about 48,000. And we do have some significant fees, professional fees in both our legal department and accounting department due to the untimely departure of the CFOs last year. We did engage with a consultant that's ongoing right now to just close out 2021 fiscal year, get it done. So much of it, $75,000 of the professional fees are one-time non-recurring, but 50 of it is additional fees that we do believe are probably just going to be required in the future. So we do believe that those are likely going to be sustaining ones. And this year, net of the 30,000 funding, the election will add an additional $18,000 cost there. Other changes, I did mention earlier the increase from salaries and benefits. So we've got the component tied to the incremental salary piece, and then this sort of one-time equalization piece. And then we did make some changes with our both our employee and our firefighter benefit cost programs. Lastly, the debt payment requirement, the increase in debt principal repayments from 2021 from 2022 to 2021 added another 105,000 to the budget this year. So our other revenues, they seem quite flat. We do have this kick in development revenue this year that will, together with the property tax increase, will help to offset and fund those additional costs. We do have significant grant revenue and proceeds of debt funding, but those don't help us with our bottom line at all. They're all spent and used on the specific projects for which they were awarded or whatever the debt was taken out of. So they're not available to help offset operating expenses. Lastly, community charter requires that council consider the distribution of property taxes among the different classes of property each year. So council has established these multiples. So for every one, so for example, farmland will pay half the rate that residential pays. The tax rates are set such that the rates charged, this is where we're picking up on this again, the rates charged on utility and light industry properties are 4.16 times the rate charged to residential. So that addition of the light industry property is, this will be very impactful for that.
Yes, it will.
Do they know you?
I don't know. I just picked up on it this weekend.
Probably not.
So it was raised earlier that they actually hadn't been categorized that way by BC Assessment. So it's the first year that they've been categorized that way. So they would have got an assessment, so they should know.
Yes, I just wonder if they understood the way the multiples work.
Yeah, the assessed value doesn't, I mean, they may just look at the numbers and not realize the tax impact.
Yeah. I just have a quick question, a process related one. When do we make this decision? Because I know we make it annually and I'm interested in discussing business.
I've only done it the one time. and-
Really?
We've reaffirmed it every time. We've never wanted to change it.
Okay, because I'm interested in changing or talking about, discussing, thinking about why do so many municipalities charge a higher rate for business
Well-
and other?
Well, business class and other. So I did a little bit of research and I found that, where is it? Tax class multiples. I found that only 2 BC municipalities with a 1-to-1 ratio are Anmore and ourselves. So I was wondering what would be the impact of changing the property tax multiple from 1.1 to say 1.2 for business. And the impact on residential taxpayers would be a reduction to their property taxes of about $51. But the impact to the businesses would be to effectively double the tax that they pay. So I guess that calculation has probably been done in the past by the council, but it is a requirement of the charter that you review it year after year and consider what the impact is.
You probably have to eat.
Yes. I mean, it's thought because Councillor Faust brought up increased wear and tear and this and all that, but more tourists coming, businesses obviously benefit from that, but we're not getting the benefit tax-wise from it, right? So I'm definitely interested in looking at that as well, because that's a huge difference there. It's stuck out for me last year as well, so it's something to look at.
It's always been the philosophy that if we didn't, keep it really low, then they wouldn't be able to maintain their status. But I think things have changed.
Yeah, we're not the same island that we were.
No, we certainly aren't.
Quickly, what would the impact to an average property owner be of a tax increase of 10.42%? So last year, the average property value was 1.229648. This year, it has increased to 1.538776.
That's the median price now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right, so let's just digest that one. Let's call it for the sake of argument 1.55. I know it's, but let's say 1.55. Okay, there's your 25, that would get 26%. Increase, okay, so.
Average increase would be about 287 over.
Okay, so it's, because this is a question that, everyone goes to the bottom right-hand corner of any statement they
Yeah.
receive initially.
Yeah.
What's the damage?
Right.
So with all of the things that Kristen has done, thank you by the way, and there's a few left out. It stands at $287. Many people, of course, actually are in taxes.
We don't know so much anymore. We're not directly involved in the reform program anymore. It goes direct to the province. Okay, 6 more slides are done. Water systems, Eagle Cliff. So we met with the LAC. They approved a recommendation to increase the revenue requirements. So we did bring a new rate structure bylaw, which we were hoping would meet that target, but they did not approve the rate bylaw. They approved the budget, they didn't approve the rate bylaw. So we agreed that we would work with the LAC to jointly develop a new rate structure that will achieve the desired revenue targets. And in Eagle Cliff, we have proposed, and they did agree to increase the parcel tax from $370 to $400, and they pay on connected and non-connected properties. Eagle Cliff has a significant capital project, the interconnection with Cove Bay. Costs are higher than $4 million. I just prepared this quick little slide to kind of see the phasing of the capital costs and then the matching funding in the bottom section. So if you want to review the slide and kind of look and see what the annual debt that they would be assuming is you can see how that works in there. Tunstall Bay, we met with Tunstall Bay. They have their new reservoir project underway. It's $655,000 that they're borrowing over 5 years right now. They have a new parcel tax of $853 for their connected properties and $512 for their unconnected. And these rates, we also increased their rates by 20% to fund a big capital PRV chamber upgrade that's going on next year. And they did request that we investigate if we can undertake a new borrowing to stretch out that amortization period and make it a little bit longer. Snug Cove Sewer, there's a $1.64 million project being funded from capital renewal and replacement reserve, and $640 from accumulated surplus. $718,000 of that will be repaid by the Snug Cove Sewer users to accumulated operating surplus over a period of 7 years. And this money will be collected by additional user fees and a parcel tax of $664 per year on the connected properties. It's important, I think, to note that there are no parcel taxes or charges that are considered being levied to property owners that reside outside of the Snug Cove Sewer specified area. King Edward Bay, the west side, the three of them, their revenue requirements were all raised the same, between 10 to 13 each year for each of the 5 years. We haven't developed a new rate proposal at this point. We are going back to those 3 committee meetings. They have a harmonized rate, they all pay the same. Instead, we're going to have a joint meeting in a couple of weeks from now, and we're going to start talking about what the rate needs to look like. And my sense was that the committees are kind of going a different way, and they may not want to continue with that harmonized rate structure anymore. So we'll see what happens. But currently, they pay $960 for connected and $600 for non-connected. Blue Water has some very significant capital expenditures on the horizon. Another $4 million project out that way too. So there are going to be some additional meetings that need to take place to try and consider how to move this MOU forward. Hood Point, we met with that LAC. They're increasing their parcel tax from $205 to $210 for unconnected properties, and $415 to $420 for the connected properties. User rates are increasing there for $840, from $800, so they're going to $840, and they have a flat rate. They do not. They've never been interested in doing any kind of consumption-based billing. So next steps, we kind of talked about that. The financial plan is going to be made available to the public for feedback from April 11th through April 24th. We will collate and collect all of that information and present it to council for consideration. A recommendation that I think would be helpful from the committee of the whole today would be to direct staff to put the budget out for public consultation. And we could ask Hope to see if we can find another possible date for a second meeting. And I think that's it.
Yeah. All right. Do you have a motion there?
Just that the committee of the whole recommend that council direct staff to receive 2 public engagements for the draft 2023-2026 budget as presented at this meeting.
Okay. Allison moved it. I'll second it. Any further discussion on that?
No. What else will be going on other than just the budget? Will there be commentary? Will it be?
Like I just got this part done.
Yeah.
I would love to have like I don't have between now and the 24th. I don't have time.
We have this video.
This slide, this presentation will definitely go out as part of the material. So I'm hoping that will kind of help to support what's in this material. Is there something that you could recommend that would maybe make things easier, or?
It helps to distribute some of the main information about property assessment.
Okay.
There's material that we've used in the past. So
Yeah,
we're
that's
just
fine.
taking a look at recent past
Yeah.
budget presentations.
Yeah.
To see if there's anything that could be
Yeah, well, I'll be working on that anyways to prepare the tax insert and that kind of stuff. So for sure, I could get like a one pager or. Yeah.
There wasn't anything in the package particularly about the garbage parcel tax.
Oh, you know what? That was my mistake. I'll add a slide into here about good point. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. Any further discussion? No? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank
And
you.
I move that council, the committee of the whole, direct council to direct staff to set up another meeting where we can have another committee of the whole, where we can have more discussion about all this fabulous information.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you, Kristen. That was
Do
great
have a
presentation,
seconder?
Patrick. Yeah,
I'll second this.
yeah. Yeah.
So put a motion.
I know. So all in favor? Aye. Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so let's take a quick break. This meeting is adjourned. We've got another one in 6 minutes, so enjoy your dinner. Excellent. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Eh?
Yeah.